For this topic, we'll be looking at the British Empire as part of our superpowers, and this is something that's called flipped learning, which is going to involve you doing the learning at home, covering some of these details. Now, as we already know, a characteristic of a superpower is its ability to invest in new technology to help it maintain that power that it already has. Now, in the 19th century, the British Empire was very, very innovative. It was the core of a rapidly expanding industrial revolution. Now, this empire was maintained by force and the threat of force, almost knowing that they're there and knowing they're rock hard. Now, during 1815 to 1905, Britain followed a policy of Pax Britannica, which literally means British peace. A global Royal Navy protected all these trade routes, and troops were sent to anywhere where there were problems. And as you can see from the picture here, this together, yes, there was this threat, but you were almost given a sense of belonging to the empire. Now, the British Empire, as with the Roman Empire, is almost a form of early globalization. You can see here the British Navy, Victorian Navy, the most powerful navy in the world, and it operated this two-power rule, meaning that the naval strength of the British Empire had to exceed the strength of the next two largest navies in the world. Britain ruled a unipolar world for most of the 19th century, so it wanted to look hard. It had to be stronger than everyone else. That was the standard they set themselves. Now, as this empire expanded, the challenge of maintaining global connections grew. In the 1860s, Britain was successful in leading the world in steam technology, and this very much follows on from the Industrial Revolution. It used a triple expansion steam engine and screw propellers, which assisted trade and communication all around the world. And in the 1850s, the late 1850s, work went to create a transatlantic cable going from from Britain to Australia to almost create this internet. And by 1866, Morse code messages were sent across the world successfully, dubbing this term a Victorian Internet, the first internet. Here you can see a map showing the British Empire in 1919, and you can see these undersea telegraph cables almost accentuating this internet, this Victorian internet. And interestingly, on this map you can see Test cricket playing nations, a very British, a very English game that was exported around the world. What I find rather ironic is that many of these former colonies are better than England at cricket. Okay, in this next section we're going to focus on two things. We're going to focus on why the British and European empires became as powerful, and we're also going to look a little bit at how this occurred. Now, the Europeans had colonized very many different parts of Africa. If you were to go to Africa today, there are a lot of different languages spoken, including Spanish, French, English, and it's all because of this colonization. Now, the attraction that Africa had was its resources, salt, spice, gold, was all there. But something followed that. Something in British history that we as Brits aren't particularly proud of, and this was the slave trade. It was actually done a lot of the time working with tribal leaders. Some people think people just went into a country and stole everyone. No, it was quite a lot of it was tribal leaders almost selling out their own kind, although that doesn't make it okay. This impoverished many African empires, and some people say, why is it that Africa is underdeveloped considering its vast amount of resources? And one very possible answer is colonization. It almost kicked its legs away before it could walk. So Africa, even today, is struggling because of this. How did the British Empire benefit from this? Well, the British Empire managed to get a lot of its resources from a poor country, if not for free, for very, very little. And that includes labour or slavery. You can see from this slide that one of the benefits of colonialisation, or colonialism, if I can say it correctly, is that if you're colonising a country, you have access to their resources. And if it's a poor country with people there that aren't aware of these resources or how to extract them, then you're in a situation that you're getting these things very, very cheaply. It's a bit like if I go on holiday to a poorer country of the world. I find that my money goes a long, long way, and I generally come home with loads of rubbish for my family. Now, there are negatives of the British Empire, but I do think it's worth saying it wasn't just the British that were at this. Okay, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French were all involved in this colonialism. For want of a better phrase, globalization. How is the developed world developed today? A lot of it is down to colonialism and the exploitation of poorer countries in Africa, Asia, South America. Not only did these Europeans colonize and use all of these resources, but it also used the manpower. Unfortunately, a lot of these places which had never experienced diseases from Europeans who didn't have the antibodies or the immune system to cope with it were suddenly faced with diseases like smallpox and syphilis, and as a result died from something that a European wouldn't think too much about and would probably treat just like a common cold. The Caribbean, where a lot of people speak English today, speak that language because of colonialism. British, French rulers went over, took over the sugar plantations because Victorian British people developed a very, very nice idea or a taste for sugar. Unfortunately, if you've ever been to Britain, it's perhaps the worst climate to grow sugar. So they took over, they went to the Caribbean, used the indigenous people and had the sugar plantations. Indigenous people, the local people, they all died through disease. So what they did was slaves were brought in from West Africa to work in their place. This is an interesting image of the 1920s, the flags of the British Empire. Have a look through, see what you notice. You will find that there's a few in there that are exactly the same today. For example, we've got Australia. Very similar flag today, in fact, absolutely the same. But interestingly, if you look, you've got places like Canada, which have changed very much after independence. Now, we've looked at empires and we've looked at colonialism. This next part, we are going to focus on why the empire collapsed. And there's no simple answer. There are a lot of different things that we are going to focus on. The Roman and British empires eventually collapsed despite their technological sophistication and military and economic power. Now, for Britain, there's a lot of suggestions for this, and the Second World War and how much money that cost. That's a very easy thing to say. It's a very easy reason for decolonialism or decolonisation. After the Second World War, 1946, USA loaned the UK a big old bundle of money to help them out, because having wars is expensive. And this had to be paid back. Now, interestingly, the last repayment for this loan to the USA was made in 2006. But you can imagine a loan of that size and the monthly payments and the interest is a burden on a country or on an empire. And being an empire isn't cheap. It's a very expensive business. However, as I said before, it's very easy to blame the Second World War on the fall of the British Empire. What we're going to look at now is some other reasons why the empire collapsed, because even before the war there was inklings that a collapse was imminent. Now this is a really interesting diagram showing the pressures an empire is put under regardless of Second World War. And you can see you've got your imperial superpower wanting to change, wanting to bring Britishness around the world. But unfortunately, as we've said already, there are financial problems. There are huge costs for trying to expand the empire. If you look at the bottom right corner, you've also got other countries that are becoming more powerful and are emerging and putting pressure on the British Empire, which is costing the British Empire even more money with its military border. Then within the empire, just like you guys in your own classroom, you've got your revolt, you've got people arguing, you've got local people who may not believe in some of the ideologies of the British Empire. And this costs more money with, say, local lawmen, local police forces. And then you've also got some places that want their own independence. They want self-rule. They don't want to be dictated to, because the British Empire could be said that it was a dictatorship. It was, we want to spread Britishness, and that is the main thing we're trying to do here. And if you're different and you haven't been brought up that way, of course you're not going to agree with this. Now here's a detailed bit of writing that I would strongly suggest you do a bit more research into and perhaps find out a little bit more about. It talks about the number of factors that undermined its stability. So going into the Second World War, the British Empire wasn't quite as strong as it had originally been in the Victorian times. There was pressure. Canada, Australia, these white colonies, they wanted independence. Pressures at home, the female suffragettes, the rise of women wanting to be equals of men, which, as we appreciate, is totally right. No tongue-in-cheek there, of course. Then there's things like the Boer War in South Africa. So whilst all this empire is going on, you've got wars here, you've got disagreements there, and all of this costs money, and it all destabilizes. And then if you think back to the diagram before, it talks about rising powers putting pressure. Russia, Germany, USA, the arms race. This whole thing is putting pressure on the empire, and costing the empire more and more money. Built-in paradox, isn't it, empire building? As they develop, their wealth increases. The colonial people exposed to wealth, power, ideas and education, and these people that have been colonized, these countries that have become part of the empire, start to want independence, start to learn, start to think for themselves. And then you have issues with trade, espionage, almost olden day terrorism, which again leads to the breakdown of the empire with this pressure being put on. This explains why some imperial powers maintained their possessions in a state of underdevelopment, because they wanted to prevent new economic and political ideas taking root. So an empire would almost try to keep some countries within its empire less developed, poorly educated, because they know knowledge is power, and that power can lead to the downfall of an empire. Now, you've been given a crash course in the rise and the fall of the British Empire. Obviously, as we know, this presentation alone is not enough to get you the highest grade in the exam. What I want you to do are several things. First of all, make notes on everything you've learned today. Secondly, do your own research, add to it, and learn everything else that you found out. And finally, to revise for a future test on the British Empire, I'd like you to watch a very, very short YouTube video that puts another idea into your head and gives you another view of the rise and fall of the British Empire. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been informative. Thank you for listening, stroke watching.